inshallah, and then we'll go into it. Assalamu alaikum. And well, oh, there we go.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum assalam. Yes, I can. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Looks like a very good program. I listened to some of what Sister Manala had to say.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. We've had a packed day of just so much enriching content, lots of great energy on the chat. People have been coming in and out. So alhamdulillah, it's going really strong. Inshallah. And I know you guys are excited for this session too, because like I said, it's a different view we're going to have, and just kind of change gears maybe for a little bit, but it's something that is definitely affecting a lot of folks with the virus, and we wanted to speak to and cover it in this in the summit. So this session is called Recessions: How to Overcome Money Anxiety, and you'll understand why we have the speaker that we do, inshallah, once you get some background into him. So I do want to give you guys, inshallah, a proper introduction to Brother Muneem. So Muneem Salam is an executive vice president and a director of Saturna Capital. He received his degrees from the University of Texas, Austin, and an MBA from Dallas. He worked as the chief investment officer for ITG and Associates until 1999, then as a representative of Morgan Stanley until joining Saturna Capital in June 2003. He served as the director of Islamic investing and a deputy portfolio manager at the Amana Mutual Funds Trust until moving to Kuala Lumpur. In 2018, he returned to the United States and resumed his role as a deputy portfolio manager of the Amana Income, Amana Growth, and Amana Developing World Funds. He's an adjunct professor at IE Business School and speaks at Islamic finances and investment conferences worldwide. He's also the co-author of A Muslim's Guide to Investing and Personal Finance. As a mark of recognition of his achievements in Islamic economy, Muneem has ranked among 500 of the Islamic world's most prominent and influential leaders by Islamica 500 in 2015. So welcome, Brother Muneem. And I just listed all his finance background, but mashallah, he has a strong Islamic background and knowledge as well. And that's why we brought him, because coupled with that, he's just gonna give us the power punch, mashallah. And a lot of people right now are really struggling, I think, with job loss. I don't know what the numbers are in the States, Brother Muneem, but I know in Canada we've had just a huge number of people apply for EI, unemployment insurance, and people just really concerned about, are they going to have their jobs still in a month or two? And so trying to wrap their heads around what a recession would look like, how that may impact them. And so we wanted to make sure we brought someone on that can give us that Islamic perspective of tawakkul when it comes to finances, inshallah, and channeling that in a positive way. So without further ado, Brother Muneem, I'm going to hand it over to you, and jazakallah khair for being with us.
My pleasure, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Alhamdulillah. ثم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. All praise is due to Allah, and after that all praise is due to Allah. We thank Him, we seek help from Him, we ask guidance in Him, and we seek forgiveness in Him from our own evils and from our own bad deeds. Anyone who has been guided by Allah, they are indeed guided, and anyone who has been misguided by Allah, you will never find a guardian to guide them. I bear witness. I bear witness that there's no deity worthy of worship except for Allah, the only one without partner, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant and his messenger. So jazakallah khair for the opportunity for being on today as one of the panelists. It's really an honor to be here and seeing so many people tuning in to be able to listen all day to what's going on. Inshallah, my talk today, inshallah, because the title of it is How to Calm Money Anxiety. I'm going to start off and really talk a little bit about, how we got here, where we're going. Hopefully that's, up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can kind of get a guide for it. And then I'll get into a little bit more about, how to keep our anxiety low from an Islamic perspective, and then ways that we can maybe overcome whatever's ahead of us from a practical perspective as well. So I'm going to keep it to that. Hopefully, usually I'm not a very long talker, so hopefully we'll have plenty of time for question and answers, inshallah. So I wanted to start off and really talk a little bit about how we got here. Now, if you know, and I apologize for those Canadians that are out there, a lot of my my talk will be focused more on the US side, but I know there's similar effects happening, and I'll try to give a little bit on for those that are Canadians as well, but I will focus more on the US. So, just to kind of give you a perspective, I mean, we've had a very, very strong economy in the US ever since about 2010. And we really haven't had a recession in the US ever since that. So there's actually a whole generation of people in the US and Canada as well that have never really been through a recession. And so even last year, the economy in the US was humming. Also, it's the same thing in Canada. And a few years before that also. So basically what was happening was, as we're driving down the road, right? A lot of times what happens is when you get into a let's back up. So when you're driving down the road and, normally in a recession, what happens is it's almost like a car engine breaking down, right? So, the car doesn't automatically come to us. It basically slowly over time, maybe maybe 1 mile, you'll slowly come to a stop. And before that stop happens, maybe your engine turns back on again and you're ready to go again. Unfortunately, what's happened is this coronavirus is almost in our recent history, right? It's actually almost unprecedented. And it's literally like, for example, if you're driving down the road and you all of a sudden you hit a tree at 30 miles an hour, and literally everything was humming really perfectly or really, really well. And all of a sudden, bam, it just stopped right in the middle. And that's exactly what happened to the economy. Is that, this is really what happened in March. Everything just basically came to a stop. And so it wasn't only about the coronavirus, and that took a big hit, but also now you begin to have secondary and tertiary effects as well. So for example, as you had the economy come to a grinding halt, right? You had oil prices that were beginning to come down because demand was coming up short. And not only that, but there was also a discussion between Russia and Saudi Arabia about what it is that they, what price of oil they should maintain. They couldn't come to an agreement. And so what Saudi Arabia ended up doing was they basically opened up the spigot and said, we're going to produce as much oil as possible. That even drove it even further. Now, for those that are Canadians out there, you would probably know a lot of your economy is built on oil. So that actually is a double whammy for you. But also in the US, because of shale oil production that's going on, it's almost about $100 billion industry. So that also had another effect on that as well. So that's kind of, a little bit about the cause. We're going to see this kind of play out in the economy in many, many different ways. I told you about oil. It's going to affect tourism. It's already affecting local businesses as far as restaurants, people working from home. All of these things are going to be, playing out. Real estate prices probably will be coming down as well because nobody's really buying any houses. And it's a time when, you're losing your job. Why would you be looking for another house? All right. So that's all going to be playing an effect. In fact, when the jobs numbers came out on Friday, there were more jobs lost in 1 month than there were for entire 2 years combined. So just to give you a perspective of how much that is, there's about 6 million job losses, and we've usually averaged about 200, 300,000 claims on an average kind of month over the past 2 or 3 years. So really, it has been very, very sudden, very, very fast, and those type of things. And then I'll get into what is it that certain people are doing, governments are doing to be able to alleviate that towards the end of my perception as well. So how long does it really last? I mean, really, we don't have a crystal ball. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. If somebody can tell you, exactly this is the time when everything's going to be turning around, they're basically doing guesswork. It's really nobody knows. And the reason why nobody knows is because, as I mentioned, it was unprecedented. But also, we don't have a handle of what's happening with the virus. We don't have a handle on when people can go back to work, when businesses will open. So that churning of the economy that happens as it begins to speed up, we never really know. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen. So all the things that are happening so far, as far as government stimulus and stuff, is all a stopgap to make sure that nothing happens in dire between now and when that economy begins to pick back up. But remember, and this is something that I want to people and brothers and sisters to keep in mind, is that inshallah we will get back to normal, right? you know, if it is something where we have to be as Muslims, you know, positive thinkers. Even the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, you know, that when the day of judgment comes, even if you're planting a seed, continue to plant it. And so this is showing the optimism that we have about life. And so, you know, this will come to an end. It might take maybe longer than we expect, or it might be shorter than we expect. But we know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But I think probably it's safe to say that the economy and the, you know, jobs coming back will probably not happen until the end of this year at the earliest, because again, there's so much disruption that's actually happened. So inshallah, with that, what I'd like to do is kind of switch gears just a little bit and talk a little bit about you know, keeping your anxiety low from an Islamic perspective. And so the first one that I wanted to talk about was reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's 3 ayahs in the Quran that I want to mention, really you know, bear light on the fact that the person that we sometimes get caught into this idea that we are the providers of our own risk. And that's not something that we consciously think about, because we all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing that. But in these times, when we are faced with some type of uncertainty about either our jobs and those type of things, we have to constantly remind ourselves of that, because you know, we're the ones thinking, oh my God, what should I be doing? Can I do this? Can I do that? But we should be reminding ourselves that at the end of the day, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to do that. Now, the first ayah that I wanted to mention was from Surah Ali Imran, verse number 27, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in translation, you know, you cause the night to enter the day, and you cause the day to enter the night, and you bring the living out of the dead, and you bring the dead out of the living, and you give provision to whom you will without account, بِغَيْرِ hisab, right? Without account, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is out there, He's giving it, and there's no end to whatever He can give. Not only there's no end to whatever He has, but there's also no end to whatever He can give out. And that's something which is interesting that I was reading the other day in Surah Isra, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, you know, if we would have given mankind all of our mercy, right, mankind would still be miserly with it. They would still hold back. That we are by nature, right, we are a little bit miserly. We're always afraid about, hey, what if I lose all of it? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely opposite. He has everything, but not only does He have it, but He's also willing to give out everything that He has as well, from that perspective. And so really having reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is really important. The second one that I wanted to mention, in Surah Mulk, ayah number 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in translation, or who is it that could provide for you if He withheld His provision? But they have persisted in insolence and aversion. And so the first part of this, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically saying is that if He was to withhold the risk, who's going to be providing it for us? We can't provide it for ourselves. It has to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do it. So we have to rely on Him to be able to provide us with whatever we have. And that's what the animals do, right? The bird every day wakes up, and they don't have, you know, they go out there seeking the risk, and they get it, and then they're satisfied with it. And the last one that I wanted to mention was in Surah Ankabut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verse 60 in translation, and how many a creature carries not its provision, right? Allah provides for it and for you, and He is the hearing, the knowing. And so again, a reminder that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is the one that we rely upon. And again, it's not something that we don't know. All of us probably in this entire audience know exactly that Allah is the source of that, the provider of that risk. But it's a constant reminder to ourselves, especially during these times, that He'll take care of us, right? No matter what happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, and He'll take care of us. So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention, to keep your anxiety low. The second thing I wanted to mention is on being content. And so the first one was reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 2 is going to be having contentment with Allah, right? So no matter how much we have in this world, or how little we have in this dunya, right? It's still more than other people have in this world. And that's the one thing that we have to keep in mind. That Abu Huraira relates in a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, wealth is not in having vast riches, but it is in contentment, right? So that's the true treasure, is actually having contentment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not having everything in this life. Because as we know, as we hear stories about it every single day, you know, those who have everything are still not content with whatever they have. They either want more, or they're not satisfied barakah in the risk that they actually do have. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that we have that. We feel content that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, that we are satisfied with, and that there are other people out there that don't have much. And I want you to do an exercise. Every time you're kind of feeling a little bit of anxiety and those type of things, what I want you to do is I want you to just walk around your house. And this was something that was when I first realized it, I was like, subhanAllah, this is really amazing. So I want you to walk around your house in your living room, and then go through your kitchen and open up your fridge, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran in Surah Waqi'ah, right? He says, وَفَاكِهَةٌ كَثِيرًا. He says, and fruit that they may choose, and the flesh of fowls that they desire. And then a few ayahs later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, no evil will they hear therein, nor any sinful speech. And then the next ayah says, but only the saying of peace or salam, right? Now I want you to think about this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here in these verses in Surah Waqi'ah is actually talking about Jannah. If we walk around our house, we're going to have couches to recline on in your living room, right? We're going to have fruit of any different kind that we desire. Even in this environment, a lot of the food supply hasn't stopped, and so even in this environment, you have many fruits that you can enjoy, right? Many different types of meat, chicken, beef, a lamb, whatever it is that you have. And then also, as we're blessed, really truly blessed to be in a Muslim family, we're not hearing evil speech. And constantly, whenever you are coming in and out of the house, maybe not from too far away, hopefully, but when you're coming in the house, you're hearing words of salam, right? So I really want you to think about that we have so much to be content about. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, describing our lives to the people living during the time of the Prophet, they would consider us to be in Jannah. And not only that, and it's not only about relating it from them to us, but also people in this world right now. Right, there are people in Africa living in other places that are living in refugee camps and those type of things. They could only imagine the blessings that we have that they are not able to have as well. Recently back in January, I visited the Rohingya camps in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, and every time I think about the restrictions that we have in America or in the U.S. And in Canada, what I always think about is the fact that I dread the COVID-19 spreading in these camps. There's no way. There's 1.5 million people in refugee camps within a small little area in refugee camps in Bangladesh. And that's not only Rohingya. You have them in Myanmar, you have them in Africa, you have other places where the disease can spread like wildfire. There's no way they would be able to contain anything along those lines. So even from this idea of the disease spreading, and I know there are the people out there that are on the front lines, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them tremendously for all the efforts that they're doing, have blessings on their family, on themselves, and those type of things. But whatever we have over here, still from that perspective of what's happening around the world or could potentially happen around the world, right? It's something you have to keep it in place. Say alhamdulillah, right? It's alhamdulillah that we really need to be content within our lives. So that was number 2. So the first one, as I mentioned to you, was reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 2 was be content with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And then the third one that I wanted to mention is remembrance of Allah. And again, brothers and sisters, just keep in mind, this is not something we don't know. All of these things that I'm mentioning is probably like, something you've already heard. But it's really a matter of how do you implement whatever you have within your lives. And that's hopefully, inshallah, because I'm not a scholar, hopefully that's what I'm trying to kind of convey to you just from a layman's perspective, alhamdulillah. So the third one that I wanted to talk about was remembrance of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Ra'd, in verse number 22, in translation, he says, verily through the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest, right? So calm yourselves down. Every time you look into the future and you're looking at it with anxiety, we just have to be able to kind of just slow ourselves down. And remembrance of Allah can come in multiple different forms, right? Imam Tahir Anwar from California, in something I was hearing the other day, he said there's 3 things we can do very, very easily that we can do this throughout the day. Number 1 is give salam to the Prophet. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim fil alamin innaka Hamidum Majid. So we give salam on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the second one was istighfar, which is basically seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the second one. Just istighfar, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, those type of things. And then also the dua of Yunus alayhi salam, la ilaha illa ant subhanaka inni kuntu min al-dhalimin. So no deity except for you. Glory be to you. Verily, I was amongst the wrongdoers. And so that's very, very easily we can do these types of adhkars or many, many different other ones that are there. And this type of adhkar, which is really coming from your thoughts, right? You're thinking about saying astaghfirullah, you're doing all of these things, you're doing them. That is something maybe let's call it the lowest form of adhkar. The next one in doing a little bit more is reading of the Quran, right? The Quran is, subhanAllah, miraculous book, alhamdulillah, and it's another form of dhikr. It's another form of remembering of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the most miraculous things that I find personally about the Quran is that whenever I read it, no matter which day I'm reading it, and no matter what section I'm in when I'm actually reading it, whenever I'm reading the Quran, there's always an answer for me for whatever I'm thinking about that day. SubhanAllah, it's an amazing thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is one of the miracles of the Quran. So when you are going through anxiety, when you are going through the current situation that we're in, pick up the Quran, read from it, and you're going to realize there are answers in it. No matter where you pick up, I challenge you, right, to be able to just pick up open up a page and start reading from there. And within the next, however long you read, you're going to be able to find an answer to whatever it is that you're actually looking for. And the last one that I wanted to mention, probably which Imam Ghazali mentions, is the highest form of dhikr, is to be able to perform salah, right? Because you're not only doing it with your soul, right? Because you're doing it with khushu, you have it on your tongue, but then also your limbs are the ones that are actually doing adhkar as well from being able to pray. So using all of your faculties of your body, you're being able to do that. So adhkar was the third one that I wanted to kind of remind everybody about. So then just kind of wrapping up, first one, reliance on Allah, being content, remembrance of Allah. The last two that I wanted to mention, the first one, we don't ever want to, talk about hardships or anything to do with economics or whatever it is without talking about charity and zakat, sadaqah and zakat, right? And it sounds counterintuitive. When I'm really, really faced with something that I might have to conserve my money on, right? You think, well, I should hold on to the money, not give it out. But it's actually the other way around. When you are feeling that, you have to be able to be able to give out in sadaqah to other people that, as I mentioned to you earlier, there are much more needy and deserving than we are, because we are truly blessed from there. And I wanted to mention this story about Musa alayhi salam and charity, and then we'll move on to from there. I found it to be a very beautiful story that I heard, and that is that at one point in time, Musa alayhi salam came into a village and he was giving dawah, and there was a very, very poor person who came up to him and he said, "Ya Musa, Ya Musa, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives me wealth. And whenever He gives me wealth, I promise that whatever He gives me, half of it, I'm going to give away to charity." And Musa basically disregards him, continues with his dawah, and then leaves. The next day he comes back to the same city, and then he's giving dawah again. The same poor person comes up to him and he says, "Ya Musa, make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I'm given wealth. And if I'm given that wealth, then I'm going to give half of my wealth away." And so again, Musa kind of disregards this person and moves on. The next day, Musa alayhi salam comes back and he's giving da'wah, and this poor person, he comes back to him and he says, Ya Musa, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for me to get wealth. And if He gives me the wealth, then I'm going to give half of it away in charity. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally, me thinking that this person is probably not going to, I'm not going to get rid of this person. He makes a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give this person wealth. And then he moves on. And he goes about his business of da'wah to other towns, and he comes back a few years later, and the town looks a little bit different. And that difference in the town, he begins to ask people around what's really going on, and they said that at the end of the town there is a huge palace built by a person who's poor, and next to the palace is a dining hall, and next to that is another dining hall, next to that is another dining hall. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Musa alayhi salam goes and he visits that person, he realizes that he says that whenever you made the dua for me, Musa, the former poor person is saying that whenever when you made that dua for me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me wealth. And as I promised, I took half of that wealth and I gave it away, and I gave it to feed other people. And so when I did that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me more. And so I took half of that and I made another hall to be able to feed the people. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me more. And then I built another one to be able to feed the people. So there was 3 halls. And so Musa was a little bit confused. And so when he was making or talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he asked Allah, he says, oh Allah, I asked you to give this servant of yours a little bit of wealth, but it looks like you've given him so much. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds back to Musa, and subhanAllah, he says that I would never let my servant be more generous than me. Subhanallah, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whatever you give, Allah will give you more, because there's no way that we can ever be more generous than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it almost became like a competition, right? Fastabiqul khairat, vie with each other for something that is good. That the more we do, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do, because there's no way that he will actually do that. So and again, this is regarding charity. And then zakat, the month of Ramadan is coming, right? This is the time that we actually calculate our zakat. And I know, right? 401ks are going to be down. Your investment portfolios are down. You might be coming up with a job loss, those type of things. But remember, zakat is an obligation, right? And it's something that we have to, again, counterintuitive. You're suffering from something, and now you have to pay it out in charity. But remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to reward us for doing that. So that was a charity and zakat that I wanted to mention. So again, just as a recap, we have, the first one was reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being content, remembrance of Allah, and the second to the last one was charity and zakat. And the last one that I wanted to mention in this regard was dua, right? The power of dua. And this is similarly related to the dhikr that I mentioned of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because dua is also a form of dhikr. And then we have to basically understand how do we do this, right? We have to truly ask sincerely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if we really, really, really wanted it, right? And whatever he gives us, we want to ask more. This is our kind of duty or our right upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's interesting when you read the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And one of the things about dua that I remember when I think about Ibrahim alayhi salam is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made in the dua that said, establish me on the earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I'm going to establish you on the earth. The very next thing Ibrahim alayhi salam does is he says, and what about my future generations? Right? It's like a little kid when he comes up to you and says, can I have some candy? And you say, yes, you can have one. And the kid says, can I have this one also? Right? That's how Ibrahim was with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like he kept asking. He was asking for dominion for himself. As soon as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to him, he asked for more. He said, what about my the generations coming after me? So we have to have that same type of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that whatever he gives us, and we know confidently he will give it to us, we're ready to ask him for more. So ask away. Ask for whatever it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you want, and know that either in this life or in the hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it to you. And then the one thing that I wanted to mention about dua, and specifically talking about anxiety and worries and recession, economy, those type of things. The one time the Prophet ﷺ walked into the masjid, and there was a companion, Abu Umama, who was sitting there. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Ya Abu Umama, why are you in the masjid when it's not even time for the prayer? Right? Why are you in the masjid when it's not even time for the prayer?" Again, this idea of seeking out the risk that you have, working toward it, kasab, right, is something that we have to have. We don't just sit idly and do nothing and be basically like deer in the headlights, stuck, not being able to do something. We constantly have to be able to do something. And so why are you in the masjid when it's not even time for the prayer? Abu Umama says, worries and debts, Ya Rasulullah. He says, I have worries and I have debts. And so the Prophet, he says, Ya Abu Umama, what if I tell you something that you can do, and if you do it, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take away your worries and pay off your debts for you? And Abu Umama says, yes, Ya Rasulullah, what is that? And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, he says to him, in the morning and in the evening, right? In the morning and in the evening, you should recite, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan, wa na'udhu bika min al-ajli wal-kasal, wa na'udhu bika min al-jubni wal-bukhl, wa na'udhu bika min ghalabati ad-dayn wa qahri ar-rijal. He says, in the morning and the evening, recite, "Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from worries and grief. I seek refuge in you from weakness and laziness. I seek refuge in you from miserliness and cowardice. And I seek refuge in you from being in the burden of debt and being in the anger of men, or being overcome by men. And so Abu Mama, it says that he said this from then on, right? He said this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away his worries for him, and he paid off his debts for him. SubhanAllah, right? And why would he not? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Udu'uni astajib lakum. If you ask me, I will answer you, right? And if in the current situation that we're in, if you're suffering from a job loss, if you're suffering from anxiety, if you're in need, right? Turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask him, because he is the one who says that if you ask me, I'm going to be the one to answer you. So if you have worries, right, make this dua sincerely in the morning after Fajr, and then in the evening around Maghrib. Make this dua sincerely, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do that. Like Abu Mama said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala paid off his worry, took away his worries, and he paid off his debts. So the worries are easy, right? Dua, you make dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do that. But what about the debts, right? What happens in that situation? So, sometimes as one time I gave this one, and I was giving a talk, and I said, most likely what's not going to happen right now, you haven't been to your bank for a little while. You check your statement online, and maybe it says something like $20 is left in your bank account. And then, you make the dua for a couple of days, nothing's really changed. And you look in your bank account, and all of a sudden there's 2 more zeros, and you have $2,000 rather than $20 in your bank account. And that's really not going to happen. I mean, miracles are possible, but let's be realistic, right? Probably it's not going to happen. And so how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take away our debts for us? And that is something that we have to keep in mind. And that is that the provider of risk, as I mentioned to you earlier, is not anything except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what he does is he opens up doors of risk that we didn't know we had. And that's really the important part about this section about making this dua, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do that, right? And so this idea of opening up doors of risk means that we have to go out there and seek that risk that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us. We can't just sit in our houses, or in the case of Abu Mama, we can't just sit in the masjid. Well, we can't do that now anyway, but maybe sit in our living rooms and just make and do nothing. We have to be able to go out there and seek this from us, right? And so one of the things that I wanted to mention, and I'll try to wrap this up in that one, right? Is that maybe this kind of a job lesson, we have to always be thinking about this, is that whatever we have, even the hardships that we face, and they're only hardships that inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deliver us from, right? There is always a blessing in them. So even, for example, if you're got a job loss, really think about the source of income that you had. And maybe this idea, if you were in the restaurant industry serving alcohol, if you're in the gambling industry doing doing the gambling thing, if you were doing those type of things, maybe this is a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. He's not cutting off your risk. What he's doing is he's giving you another avenue to be able to look for, to be able to do that. And so take that as a business, because the haram income is something that is very, very great. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ sitting around with the companions, right? And he says there was a man who was in the desert, and he was hungry, and he was a traveler, and he was in need, and he raised his hands up towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he asked Allah for help, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't give him that help. And so the companion said, why is that, Ya Rasulullah? Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him any help? He said, how could this man have had any help if the food that he ate was haram, the clothes that he wore were haram, his entire source of income was something that was haram. And so that's something very, very important to keep in mind, is that our risk that we have, right, we can get it either in a haram way or in a halal way, because the risk is something that is guaranteed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He's the provider of it. What we have to do is we have to seek it out. So a person can get a risk from selling drugs, selling alcohol, or selling halal things, right? The risk is going to come to us no matter what. That's promised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we do, how we go about earning it, is something that we have to keep in mind. And then also, Abu Huraira relates in a hadith that's in the books of Bukhari, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, a time will come upon people when one will not care how one gains one's money, legally or illegally. And subhanAllah, this is something that we're almost living in now. I have so many people that every time I give a talk on a halal income, they begin to argue with me about how it's okay to, be involved with alcohol or selling alcohol, those type of things. So subhanAllah, we're living in those times. And then also the last one that I wanted to mention in this regard was reported by Jabir, and it's in the books of Imam Ahmad. He said that the Prophet ﷺ said, the flesh and body that is raised on unlawful sustenance shall not enter paradise. Hell is more deserving to the flesh that grows on one's body out of unlawful sustenance. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from haram income and to give us avenues of risk that we can seek out that are halal. So just in summary, basically, right, in order for us to keep our anxieties low during this time, from an Islamic perspective, again, this is not something that nobody knows. We all know it, alhamdulillah, but it's more a matter of how do we implement it within our lives. So number one was reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He's the one, He's going to take care of everything. He's the one who's going to provide us with the risk. The second one is be content, that whatever we have, there are people out there that have much less. We have our health, there are people that are unhealthy. We have our house, people are homeless. We have, whatever we have, even if it's really little, it's more than other people have. The remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is another one, right? Maybe counterintuitive, but we need to make sure that we're giving in charity and in zakat. And the last one is dua, that we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get us out of whatever misery and anxiety and hardship and miserliness and all of these things that we're doing. And we always seek out avenues of this that are halal for us to be able to do that. Now, let me change gears a little bit, inshallah, and I want to talk a little bit about what we can do as, practically speaking. Now I'm going to put my practical hat on. What the U.S. government is doing, and then again, this is something where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Canadian government does have programs as well. I'm just not as familiar with them because I live in the U.S. So if you need to know, I'm sure there's websites, there's assistance available from a lot of other Canadian Muslims out there that you can actually seek from. But in the US, what the government is, again, we're driving down the road in a very, very healthy economy, and all of a sudden, bam, we get hit by a tree and the economy is coming to us, coming to a halt, right? What the government doing right now is what we would consider triage. Triage means we got to fix the situation now. We'll worry about what happens later on as far as fixing the economy later on down the road. And so this triage, what they're talking about, was in an act that was signed by Congress called the CARES Act, C-A-R-E-S. So what the government is allowing, helping us to do, right? Obviously, if you pay your taxes, then you are going to be eligible for this. And is that the government, as a temporary stopgap, they're going to give $1,200 per family, right? If you're making as a single earner, $75,000 as a single earner, or $150,000 if you're dual income. So you're going to get automatically, you don't have to do anything as long as you filed your taxes in 2018 and are going to file them obviously in 2019, right? And then for every child in your family that's under the age of 16, you're going to get $500. So that's the other thing that the government has said that they're going to be able to do that. Next one is that if you already have been, male protected from this, a job loss or something like that, then the unemployment wages have been increased by $600 for people that are currently unemployed. And as I mentioned to you, there are a lot of people that are unemployed, and unfortunately, a lot more will be as the April and the May numbers come out. So that's one benefit that we can do. There's also, if you have been working for a little while, you have retirement money, whether an IRA or 401k or something along those lines, then the government has made it a lot easier to be able to tap into your retirement savings to take out, to be able to use during this time. It has to be something specifically related to this current crisis that we're in regarding COVID-19, but you can actually do that. The details again are available for you on different various websites. So please do keep that in mind. And then the last one is there's also for those businesses that have less than 500 employees, what the government is doing is they're actually saying that they're going to give you a grant for the average of your wages for the past 12 months. And that as long as you keep your employees on payroll for the next two months, they're going to make this whatever money you get as a grant. If you fire people, then whatever amount that gets reduced by, that'll be converted into a loan. right? And so that is something that also people can take advantage of. So that's something in the US we have, alhamdulillah. I was quickly reading through some sites in Canada. I know, mashallah, Canadians have sometimes even more government support than we do in America. So I highly recommend you go to the websites and begin to figure out what kind of government help is there. And then the other one, let's talk about it not from the government perspective, but for our own. What is it that we can do as individuals to be able to, kind of get through this environment? So the first thing that I want to talk about is really about how do we, in a practical way, how do we cut costs, right? So there's a few different ways, right? Number one is we're staying home, right? Because of these stay home, stay safe policies around the country. We're staying home, so we're not driving to work. We're spending a lot less gas either on our cars. We're not paying for toll on the highways. We're not paying for our train rides, mass transport, those type of things. Consider those a savings, and so try not to spend that on other things that are useless. Consider those things that are a blessing, and we're able to do that. That's the other thing that I was thinking about also was, because we're not going to work, we're not having lunches with our colleagues. We can stay home and maybe have a lot less and a lot cheaper to be able to do that. So that's another way you can actually cut your expenses. And the third way that I wanted to mention is that if you have a car that you're not using because you're staying home for the next month, 2 months or so, right? In Washington State, we have it until May 4th, which is 1 more month away. What you can do is you can call your insurance company and you can tell them that you want to reduce your insurance from your regular one down to a storage insurance. When you do that, right, then your bill at the end of the month, monthly bill will become a lot less. Then when you go back to work, inshallah, after you go back to work, then you can put it in the day before you go back to work. You can call the insurance company back, and you can tell them to bring that up again from on the payments for liability and those type of things. So that could save you, sometimes in upwards of $50 a month to do that. The next one that I wanted to talk about was the cell phone, right? My company right before about a couple of weeks ago announced that they were going to be offering unlimited data for the next 2 months for all data plans. So the first thing you can think about is, if they're going to offer you unlimited data and you already have unlimited data, why don't you go call your cell phone company and reduce it down to the minimum data, because at least for the next 2 months, you're going to get that free data anyway. And so again, that would reduce your cell phone bill, and then you'd be able to still get the benefit of being able to do that. And then also, obviously, there's many different free offers that are out there, from from subscriptions to streaming services, those type of things. So if you can get off of those and get on the free ones, that's going to be saving you some money as well. So those are some things to be able to keep in mind. And then the other thing that I want to mention is there are certain things that are like forbearance, right? There are programs that are in place that, for example, if you're renting, right, then right now the landlords are not forgiving. This is really important. They're not forgiving your rent, but they're giving you a forbearance, meaning that you don't have to pay this month in April, but we'll just tack it on to May, maybe even longer than that. So again, this will basically begin to save you money if you are saving, having some kind of a job loss or something along those lines. The other one is if you own your home and you own it even in a halal mortgage, right? They're offering a mortgage payment deferrals. In fact, 80% of all first homeowners are part of a government program, right? They get their lending done, but that's part of a government program, including the Islamic mortgages, by the way. And so the government says, if we own your mortgage, then the forbearance is a given. So for the next, let's say 2 or 3 months, you might not have to pay a mortgage bill if you are suffering some type of loss, but it's not an automatic thing. So you do have to call your provider and be able to ask them to do that. And so that would be one way to do that. But one thing to keep in mind, this is important. Again, this is not a forgiveness of the loan for this amount of time. They don't know what they're going to do. They might tack it in after this crisis is over, or they might tack it in at the end of whatever your mortgage term was. So again, it's not a forgiveness. This is a forbearance. And so we have to keep in mind. So if you don't need it, then don't use it, because it'll just cause you a little bit more trouble down the road, right? They're also offering these things on car payments, is also something that we can do. You know, on the mortgage side of it, maybe this is a good time to be able to refinance, but keep in mind, right? I mean, if you lost your job, no company is going to refinance you. So that's not going to be an option for you. If you, alhamdulillah, if you're in a position where you have a job and you want to think about refinancing, maybe you'll get a low Islamic rate that you can go for, and maybe that'll work out to be better. But you have to do the math on that to figure out whether or not that would be actual practical or not, right? So that we talked about car deferment, right? The other thing is, if you do have student loans, right? The government has said that you don't have to pay, if there's a government loan, not a private student loan, but a government loan, that you don't have to pay for that loan for until September. And also there won't be any interest charges on the loan amount for that period of time. Again, you know, if you're working and it's something that you can afford to do, now is the opportune time for you to pay off that student loan. You're getting it for 0%. You know, there's a blessing in that, and just pay it off as soon as possible, because you'll be able to, be better off because of it. Now, and then the last thing that I wanted to mention is the second to last thing that I wanted to mention is that, you know, the best time to plant an oak tree was 30 years ago, but the next best time is today. And so what I want you to think about is, you know, these type of cycles of economic booms and then economic recessions, those type of things, you know, they're going to happen. If you're young, they're probably going to happen to you 2 or 3 times in your life. And so what we need to do is we need to establish a good habit, right, of saving when we have it, and then using it when we don't have it, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, may Allah have mercy on a man who earns his money in a halal way, who spends it economically and saves some of it for a day when he needs it, right? That's a rainy day fund. So we need to be able to get into these habits of being able to save whatever amount it is you can afford, but saving some of it so that next time the hardship happens, you're not going to be able to do that. I know now if you're facing a hardship, very difficult to hear this idea of, oh, you should have done this, you know, 3-4 years ago, but that's okay. Whatever your circumstances was, hindsight's always 20/20. Don't worry about it. But going forward, right, come up with a new plan of how you're going to save, so that in the future, when this happens again, not if, because these are things that will happen, hardships come all the time. When that happens, you will have some savings to be able to keep in mind. Inshallah, I only have very little time, so I wanted to mention one last thing, inshallah, and that is that there are, even in this environment, right? And remember I talked about this idea of opening up doors of risk that we didn't know we had, right? There are industries right now that are still hiring, and some of them are desperate for people to come and work for them because they don't have enough workers. Number one is the grocery stores. As more people are basically, as people get sick, unfortunately, or they're not able to come to work because they have a loved one who's sick, something like that, right? Grocery stores are looking for people to work. So go out there and find one. Pharmacies is another one where they're actually looking for people to do that. Even, right, I was reading the other day in a story that, you know, because they basically, the borders have been cut, Mexico has sealed their borders and the US has because of COVID-19, migrant workers are not being able to come into the US to work on the farms, right? And so that's another opportunity for you to be able to seek out some risk that might not have been available to you before. And the last thing that I wanted to mention in this is, when you are facing some type of crisis, we need to sometimes humble ourselves, right? Maybe and when everything is fine, right, you wouldn't be working as a migrant worker, right? However, you know, when push comes to shove and you're in the situation where you don't have a job and you have bills to pay and those type of things, it's really, really important that you, you know, kind of don't be shy about it and seek out the risk that you can wherever you can find it, as long as, and this is really, really important, as long as the earning is halal. As I mentioned to you, there's 3 criteria the Prophet mentioned about the man who had mercy. Number 1 was he earned his money in a halal way. Very, very important. You earn the money in a halal way. Then you spend it economically. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, in Surah Furqan, He says, those who, when they spend, are neither extravagant nor are they miserly, right? And so you have to have a balance between the two. You're not overly spendthrift, right? You don't spend on anything that comes about, but also you're not miserly with your family, with your loved ones, with yourself, and those type of things. So what is that middle way? That middle way means whatever risk Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you, right? There's certain things you should make a habit of yourself to say that there's certain things that are right upon me. Number one is I spend on myself. Number two is I spend on my family. Number three is I spend in sadaqah and in zakat. Those are, just make it into a habit, right? To be able to do that. And once you do that, so when you get into that situation, when you do that, you begin to save, right? And what I meant by on yourself was to save. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will bless you in the future. So inshallah, with that, I want to close. I'm not sure. There are some questions. I'm not sure if I'm sure just to read them off or what, but inshallah, let me try to do that, inshallah. So number one was, okay, yeah.
I'll help you. So we have time for like 1 or 2 questions, inshallah.
Okay,
I'm
go
going
for
to
it.
try to take the ones that are most relevant.
Sure, go ahead.
A lot. And Jazakallah khair, I really loved, mashallah, just the way you approached the topic. Alhamdulillah, I think you really broke down some of the more practical components and of course the spiritual as well. So we have some questions about the waqf. Okay, is there an income requirement that needs to be for me, I think, to get funds for dependents? Okay, so something very specific. I'd say for those ones, do you think it's better that they maybe look them up online, given like their country context and where you are in the world? So it depends, I think, on what your government's providing. So I'm gonna try to take the ones you guys, okay, so what are some halal investment avenues that I can start now?
Okay. So for those of you, I mean, are there, by the way, are there people from around the world, or are they just US and Canada?
We had like almost every continent covered, so.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So let me just talk a little bit about, so there are now globally, mashallah, a lot of halal investments that you can actually take advantage of. If you're in Southeast Asia, if you're in the Middle East, you're blessed to be in a Muslim country, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bless you with that. There are offerings from Islamic banks to have halal bank accounts. There's Islamic mutual funds you can invest in. So all different avenues, even halal, insurance is available to you to do that. If you're in the US, there are companies in the US that also offer halal investments. We do it at Saturna we have at amanafunds.com. There are ETFs that are available, other mutual funds that are available. So the avenues for doing that are plenty. And so, try to take advantage of them as much as you can. And primarily, and in the third world, at least that I know of, I know somebody's asking about Nigeria, and I don't know specifically any countries, but majority of the developing world will have at least one Islamic bank where there are a significant amount of Muslims. So just keep that in mind. So just do your research, inshallah, and make sure that there are some halal alternatives for you, and most likely there will be.
Inshallah. And that's the other question too. Right now, are there investment incomes? Oh, sorry, no, I missed that one. It went up, but it basically someone was asking about opportunities for investors to invest in halal opportunities. So I think what you just listed goes along with that, inshallah.
Yes.
And you guys can go to, if you Google Amana Mutual Funds, inshallah, the site will come up and you'll be able to go there and get through it. We are hoping to do something with Brother Maleem in the future, hopefully very close near future. Just a very thorough course to help people kind of dive into, inshallah, halal investing. He opened my eyes to so much, and I think feel like there's so much red tape, and alhamdulillah, he's really deconstructed that. So keep your eyes out for that and discover you soon, inshallah. Okay. So with that, we'll end off this session. Jazakallah khair, Brother Maleem. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family. Thank you for giving us your time and knowledge.
No, Jazakallah khair. It was an honor to be on and participating with everybody on here, inshallah. So
alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum. All right, guys. So while we set up for the next session, inshallah.